Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people story. I had spent 5 years saving for this pool. 5 years of skipped vacations and 60-hour work weeks as a freelance graphic designer. Every client project, every late night deadline, every time I chose ramen over takeout, it all led to this moment. My 30-foot, 15,000 gallon slice of heaven sitting in my backyard like a perfect blue mirror reflecting the morning sky. It was my sanctuary, my reward for grinding through the hardest years of my career. The pool installation had been completed just 3 months ago, and I still got that little thrill every morning when I stepped out with my coffee and saw it there. The contractors had done an amazing job. The water was crystal clear, the automatic cleaning system hummed quietly, and the LED lights turned the whole thing into this magical blue glow at night. I'd worked so damn hard for this thing that I actually teared up the first time I dove in. Then Karen moved in next door. I should have known trouble was coming the day she showed up at my door with a clipboard and an attitude that screamed, "I'm here to make your life difficult." She'd introduced herself as the new VP of Neighborhood Standards for our HOA board and immediately started lecturing me about my mailbox being 2 inches too far from the curb according to some obscure bylaw she'd apparently memorized. The woman was maybe 45, with that kind of aggressively maintained blonde hair that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. She had this way of standing with her hands on her hips like she was permanently posing for an argument. Within her first week in the neighborhood, she'd already left violation notices on 3 different houses for various infractions like non-approved garden gnomes and improperly maintained lawn edges. Our actual community pool, if you could even call it that, was this sad little concrete circle about the size of a hot tub located near the mailboxes on the other side of the neighborhood. It had a broken fountain in the middle that hadn't worked in years and was surrounded by a chain-link fence that looked like it belonged around a prison yard. The whole thing was maybe 6 feet across and 2 feet deep. Most people just drove past it without even noticing it existed. That was Karen's problem, I think. She'd probably imagined moving into a neighborhood with this amazing community pool where she could hold court and be the queen of summer gatherings. Instead, she got a glorified puddle that nobody used. But my pool, my beautiful, pristine, expensive pool, was right there next to her house, mocking her every time she looked out her kitchen window. The first sign of real trouble came on a Tuesday morning while I was out front checking my mailbox. Karen appeared at my elbow like she'd been waiting behind a tree. "Hi there," she said in that fake, sweet voice people use when they're about to ruin your day. "I'm just stopping by to get your gate code for the pool area. The board has decided to add your pool to the official community amenity list, and we're planning the first neighborhood swim day for this Saturday." I actually laughed because I thought she was joking. "I'm sorry, what now? Karen, there must be some kind of mistake. This is my private pool. The community splash pad is over on the other side of the neighborhood." But Karen just smiled that condescending smile that made me want to throw my coffee at her. "Oh, no mistake at all. The HOA bylaws are very clear about shared recreational resources. Your property survey shows an easement that gives the HOA jurisdiction over amenities like pools. We'll need that gate code by Thursday so we can distribute it to all the residents. I'm sure you want to be a good neighbor and follow the rules." She said it with such confidence that for a split second I actually wondered if I'd missed something important in all the paperwork when I bought the house. Then common sense kicked in. I'd read every single document related to this property 3 times because it was the biggest purchase of my life. There was no easement. There was definitely no clause giving the HOA rights to my backyard. "Karen, I think you need to double-check those bylaws," I said as politely as I could manage. "This is definitely private property and any uninvited access would be considered trespassing." She actually rolled her eyes at me. "Honey, I've been studying these bylaws for months. I know what I'm talking about. But if you want to be difficult about it, that's your choice. The swim day is happening either way. See you Saturday." And then she just walked away like the conversation was over and she'd won. I spent the next 2 hours digging through every piece of paperwork I had related to the house purchase. Property deeds, survey, HOA documents, everything. Just as I thought, there was absolutely nothing giving the HOA any rights to my pool or any other part of my backyard. The only community amenities mentioned in the bylaws were that sad little splash pad and the equally sad community mailbox area. I crafted what I thought was a very professional email to Karen that same afternoon. I cited the specific bylaw sections that defined private versus community property, attached a copy of my survey, and clearly stated that my pool was private property and any uninvited access would be considered trespassing. I even included the non-emergency police number and suggested she contact them if she had any questions about property rights. Her response came back within an hour. It was 2 sentences. "See you Saturday. Bring snacks." Wednesday morning, I found a bright yellow flyer stuffed into my mailbox. The thing looked like it had been designed by someone who'd discovered every font in Microsoft Word and decided to use them all. The header read, "Grand Opening HOA Pool Day," in giant rainbow letters, followed by my exact address in bold. Saturday at 1 p.m., bring your own towels and floaties. Let's celebrate our new community pool. Refreshments will be provided. At the bottom, in smaller print, it said, "Event sponsored by the Neighborhood Standards Committee," with Karen's name listed as the contact person. I was so angry I could barely see straight. This woman was literally advertising a trespassing event. I grabbed the flyer and marched straight to Karen's house, where I found her on her front porch with two other women I recognized from the monthly HOA meetings. They were stuffing more flyers into a box, clearly preparing to distribute them to every house in the neighborhood. "Karen, you need to stop this right now," I said, holding up the flyer. "You are inviting people to trespass on my property. Take these flyers down and send a retraction email immediately." All three women looked at me like I'd just interrupted their book club meeting to complain about the refreshments. Then Karen started laughing. Not a polite chuckle, but a full-on cackle that made her sound like the villain in a Disney movie. "Oh, sweetie, don't be so selfish," she said, and her friends nodded along like backup singers. "It's for the community good. Besides, the HOA board decides what counts as community property, not individual homeowners. If you try to lock that gate on Saturday, we'll just have the lock cut off and bill you for the inconvenience. This is happening whether you like it or not." One of her friends chimed in with, "It's not like you use the pool every day anyway. We see you at work all the time." The other one added, "Some people are just naturally selfish. That's why we need HOA rules to keep everyone in line." They were all smiling at me like they genuinely believed they were teaching me an important lesson about sharing, like I was a kindergartner who needed to learn to play nice with others. "See you Saturday," Karen called out as I walked away. "Don't forget the snacks." I could hear them laughing behind me as I headed home. She actually thought she could just steal my pool through sheer audacity and HOA intimidation. As I walked, I noticed she was already taping more flyers to mailboxes and street signs. The woman was literally advertising a crime and expecting me to provide snacks for it. That's when I called my friend Mark. Mark had been my go-to pool guy since the installation. He was this laid-back dude in his 30s who ran a small pool maintenance company and had somehow managed to become an expert on every possible pool problem you could imagine. He was also the kind of person who appreciated a good prank, especially when it involved putting entitled people in their place. "You're not going to believe this," I told him when he picked up the phone. I explained the whole situation, from Karen's initial demand for the gate code to the flyers advertising a trespassing party in my backyard. Mark was quiet for a few seconds after I finished. Then he started chuckling. "Oh, this is rich," he said. "You've got yourself a classic entitled pest infestation. Don't worry, I know exactly what to do. I need to come over tomorrow and run a diagnostic on your pool system." "A diagnostic?" "Yeah, we use this special tracer dye to find micro leaks in pool liners and circulation systems. It's completely non-toxic, safe for skin contact, won't damage your pool equipment or affect the chemical balance. But it is extremely blue, like aggressively blue. And it has this interesting property where it clings to hair, swimsuits, and skin for about 24 hours, especially if that hair has been chemically processed." I started grinning before he even finished explaining. "The best part," Mark continued, "is that it's a completely legitimate pool maintenance procedure. I've got all the proper certifications and material safety data sheets. If anyone asks, I was just doing my job checking for potential leaks. Can't help it if some trespassers happen to get in the way of a routine pool service." "Mark, you're a genius." "I know. See you tomorrow night, and make sure you've got plenty of documentation about the trespassing situation. You want everything by the book." Friday evening, Mark showed up in his official Pool Pro service truck, complete with magnetic company logos and a clipboard full of official-looking paperwork. He was wearing his professional uniform and had that serious expression he saved for dealing with difficult pool problems. The tracer dye came in a small bottle that looked like concentrated blue food coloring. Mark explained that the stuff was designed to disperse evenly through the water circulation system and would show up under UV light to reveal any leaks. The concentration was carefully measured to be completely safe but highly visible. "The trick," Mark said as he added the dye to the pool's circulation pump, "is that it takes about 12 hours to fully integrate into the water system. Right now, it's going through your filters and getting distributed evenly. By tomorrow afternoon, every drop of water in this pool is going to be loaded with this stuff, but it won't be obviously colored until something disturbs the water significantly." We stood there watching the pool as the filtration system slowly circulated the dye. The water still looked perfectly normal, maybe with just a slightly different shimmer in the late evening light. "Now for the fun part," Mark said, pulling out his phone. "I need to document this service call properly." He took several photos of the pool, the chemical readings, and the official paperwork. Everything was completely legitimate. He really was conducting a leak detection test, and the dye was a standard tool for that kind of work. The fact that it was also perfect for catching trespassers was just a happy coincidence. After Mark left, I spent the evening preparing for Saturday's uninvited guests. First, I installed 2 large, professionally printed "No Trespassing, Private Property, Violators Will Be Prosecuted" signs on the gate. They were the kind of signs you see at construction sites, impossible to miss or misinterpret. Next, I set up my security camera system. I had one camera pointed directly at the pool from the house, and I positioned my phone on a tripod inside the sliding glass door with a clear view of the entire backyard. I wanted multiple angles of whatever was about to happen. The most important step was calling the non-emergency police line. I explained the situation to the dispatcher. "I'm the homeowner at 123 Oak Street. A neighbor has been distributing flyers inviting the entire neighborhood to a pool party at my private pool tomorrow afternoon. I've warned her multiple times that this constitutes trespassing, but she's ignored me. I'm concerned that a large group of people is going to attempt to force entry to my backyard tomorrow around 1 p.m. The dispatcher took down all the details and assured me that they would have an officer patrol the area around that time. She also noted in the system that I had called ahead about potential trespassing, which would be helpful if I needed to file formal charges later. Saturday morning, I was up early checking everything one more time. The pool looked absolutely perfect. Crystal clear water with maybe just a hint of extra sparkle in the sunlight. The tracer dye was completely invisible unless you knew what to look for. At 12:50 p.m., I positioned myself inside the house with my phone camera ready and the security system recording. Through the window, I could see Karen marching down the street with a rolling cooler, a portable speaker, and a group of about 15 people, including several kids. The group stopped at my gate, and I could hear Karen's voice carrying across the yard even through the closed windows. She was pointing at the new "No Trespassing" signs and laughing loudly. "Look at this," she announced to her group. "She put up decorations for our party. How thoughtful." I watched in amazement as Karen confidently unlatched the gate I deliberately left unlocked. She wanted to play games with my pool, so I was going to let her play. The group followed Karen through the gate like she owned the place. She strutted over to the pool edge and dramatically dipped her toe in the water. "Perfect temperature," she declared. "See? I told you she was just bluffing with all that trespassing nonsense. This is community property and we have every right to be here." That's when Karen looked directly at my house and smiled that same condescending smile she'd been giving me all week. "Last one in is a rotten egg," she shouted. And then Karen, wearing what looked like an expensive white and gold striped swimsuit, took a running jump and cannonballed straight into the center of my pool. The effect was instantaneous and spectacular. The moment Karen hit the water, it was like a blue dye bomb had exploded underwater. The clear pool instantly turned into a swirling cloud of the most aggressive neon blue color I'd ever seen. It wasn't a subtle tint. This was full-on cartoon character blue, like someone had dumped liquid Smurfs into the water. Karen surfaced, sputtering, and immediately started screaming. Her carefully maintained blonde hair was now streaked with bright blue that made her look like she'd been attacked by a paintball gun. The white stripes on her swimsuit had turned electric blue, and her skin was stained from head to toe in that same impossible color. But the best part was that she wasn't alone. 3 other adults had jumped in right behind her, and 2 kids had been splashing around the shallow end. All of them emerged from the water looking like they'd been dunked in blue food coloring. I grabbed my phone and stepped out onto the patio, making sure the camera was capturing everything. "Karen," I called out cheerfully, "I'm surprised to see you here. I thought I made it clear this was private property. Are you feeling okay? You look a little blue." Karen's face went through about 15 different shades of rage, all tinted blue. "What did you do?" she screamed, stumbling out of the pool and dripping blue water all over my deck. "You poisoned us. This is assault. I'm calling the police right now." "Oh, you don't need to do that, Karen," I said, still recording. "I already called them." And right on cue, like something out of a movie, a police cruiser pulled into my driveway. The officer who got out was this middle-aged guy who looked like he'd seen everything the job could throw at him. But even he paused for a second when he saw the group of bright blue people standing around my pool. "Officer!" Karen shrieked, rushing toward him and leaving a trail of blue footprints on my concrete. "Arrest this woman immediately! She booby-trapped her pool! She assaulted us with dangerous chemicals! Look what she did to us!" The officer looked from Karen to me, clearly trying to process the situation. "Ma'am," he said to me, "I believe you called about potential trespassing. "That's correct, officer," I replied calmly. "As I mentioned in my call, these people have been warned multiple times that they are trespassing on my private property. I have video documentation of the entire incident, and as you can see, I have clearly posted no trespassing signs." The officer nodded and then turned back to Karen. "Ma'am, why exactly are you blue?" Karen started sputtering again. "It's her! She did something to the water! She planned this!" That's when I stepped forward with my prepared explanation. "Officer, I should mention that I'm currently having my pool serviced for a suspected leak detection. My licensed pool technician added a non-toxic UV tracer dye to the water yesterday as part of a routine diagnostic procedure. It's completely harmless to humans. Here's the material safety data sheet." I handed him the official documentation that Mark had left with me, complete with his business license and the technical specifications for the tracer dye. "The dye is designed to help identify leaks in pool systems," I continued. "It's used by pool professionals all over the country. I suppose it does prove one thing definitively. These people were definitely in my pool without permission." The officer took a moment to look over the paperwork, then surveyed the scene again. Karen and her group were still dripping blue. There were clear no trespassing signs posted, and he could see the yellow flyers scattered around my patio where they'd been dropped during the chaos. "Ma'am," he said to Karen, "do you live at this address?" "No, but do you have permission from the homeowner to be on this property? The HOA gives us the right." "I'm going to stop you right there," the officer said. "The HOA doesn't override private property rights. These signs clearly indicate no trespassing, and the homeowner has documentation that she warned you about this ahead of time." He started writing tickets. Karen tried to argue, but every word just made it worse. The officer cited her and the other adults for criminal trespassing, and he strongly suggested they leave the property immediately before he decided to add additional charges. The walk of shame was absolutely glorious. Karen and her group had to trudge through the neighborhood in broad daylight, dripping blue water and leaving a trail like some kind of demented Easter egg hunt. I could see neighbors coming out of their houses to watch the parade of blue people heading home. The best part was hearing the conversations as they passed other yards. "Mommy, why is that lady blue?" "I don't know, honey. Let's go inside." "Is that the woman who's been leaving all those violation notices?" "Sure looks like her. Guess she violated something herself." Karen's own kids were crying, not just from embarrassment, but because the dye had gotten in their eyes and hair. One of the other families started arguing among themselves about who was responsible for this disaster. By evening, the story had exploded on the neighborhood Facebook group and the local community message board. Someone had taken a video of the blue parade and posted it with the caption, "HOA Karen gets what she deserves." The comments were brutal but hilarious. Finally, someone stood up to her. "That's what you get for thinking you own everyone else's property. Best thing to happen in this neighborhood in years. Does anyone know where to buy that blue dye? Asking for a friend." The HOA drama continued for weeks. Karen apparently contacted a lawyer about suing me for the pool incident, but according to the Neighborhood Gossip Network, her attorney dropped the case after my lawyer sent over the video evidence and Mark's official service documentation. Turns out it's pretty hard to sue someone for conducting legitimate pool maintenance when you were trespassing at the time. The real HOA president, not Karen with her made-up VP title, sent me a formal written apology within a week. He assured me that Karen had been spoken to about overstepping her authority and that the board would be reviewing all of her recent decisions and actions. More importantly, the next month's HOA newsletter quietly removed any mention of community pools from the amenities directory. The sad little splash pad was still there, but there was no longer any confusion about what constituted actual community property. Karen herself seemed to disappear from neighborhood life for a while. She stopped showing up to HOA meetings, stopped leaving violation notices on people's cars, and definitely stopped posting on the community Facebook page. When I did see her around the neighborhood, she would literally cross the street to avoid walking past my house. The blue dye situation turned out to be even better than Mark had promised. According to my other neighbors, it took almost 3 weeks for Karen's hair to return to anything resembling its original color. Apparently, she'd tried everything from clarifying shampoo to a professional color correction at an expensive salon, but the dye was designed to be persistent. One neighbor told me they'd seen Karen at the grocery store wearing a baseball cap and sunglasses like she was trying to go incognito. Another said she'd been spotted at a drugstore buying every blonde hair dye product on the shelf. The whole experience taught me something important about standing up to bullies, especially the HOA variety. People like Karen count on others being too polite or too scared to fight back. They use intimidation and fake authority to get their way because most people will just give in rather than deal with the confrontation. But sometimes you have to call their bluff. Sometimes you have to let them follow through on their threats and face the consequences. Karen was so convinced that she could just declare my pool to be community property that she never stopped to consider what would happen if she was wrong. The best part about the whole thing was that everything I did was completely legal and above board. I warned her multiple times about trespassing. I posted clear signs. I called the police ahead of time. I had my pool serviced by a licensed professional using standard industry procedures. When Karen chose to ignore all of those warnings and trespass anyway, she walked straight into the natural consequences of her own actions. 6 months later, my pool is still my private sanctuary. I still get that same peaceful feeling when I sit out there with my morning coffee, watching the sun reflect off the crystal clear water. The automatic cleaning system still hums quietly, and the LED lights still turn everything into a magical blue glow at night. Karen still lives in the neighborhood, but she's learned to mind her own business. She hasn't left a single violation notice since the blue dye incident, and she definitely hasn't tried to claim anyone else's property as community-owned. I guess she finally learned that community property is a matter of legal fact, not personal opinion. And sometimes the best way to prove something isn't yours is to let someone try to take it and see what happens. My pool dye was the only proof she needed. The next one is a malicious compliance story. I live in student housing in Uppsala. Old building, thin walls, you know how it is. My upstairs neighbor complained about me twice last month. Once because I was vacuuming too late at 8 p.m. on a Saturday. Once because my friend and I were talking in the kitchen at like 10:30 p.m. on a weeknight. Both times the building manager knocked on my door the next day. Very serious about it. Told me the quiet hours are 10 p.m. to 7 a.m. and I need to be more considerate even outside those hours. I tried to explain that 8 p.m. on a weekend seems reasonable for vacuuming and that we were literally just having a conversation at normal volume. He said it doesn't matter. If someone complains, he has to follow up, and maybe I should examine my lifestyle choices. Okay, so, this annoyed me because my upstairs neighbor is not quiet. At all. I hear furniture dragging at midnight, loud TV, footsteps constantly, bass from music. But I figured that's just apartment living and never said anything. Building manager said if I have concerns, I should document them. Every incident, date and time, description of noise, then he can address the pattern. So I did. For 3 weeks, I wrote down every single noise I heard from upstairs. Footsteps at 6:45 a.m., TV volume at 11:15 p.m., chair scraping at 1:30 a.m., shower running at 6:20 a.m., footsteps at 7:10 a.m., footsteps at 9:40 p.m., footsteps at 11:55 p.m. I had 4 pages of documentation. Times, dates, type of noise, duration when I could estimate it. Gave it to the building manager last week. He looked at it for a while and then said something like, "This is excessive and normal living noises aren't violations." I said sure, but you told me to document concerns, so I did. He said he meant legitimate disturbances, not someone walking in their own apartment. But here's the thing. He still had to give the list to my upstairs neighbor per building policy once a formal complaint is filed, which apparently my 4-page document counted as. My upstairs neighbor left a note under my door yesterday. She's a PhD student, works weird hours because of lab access times. She said the list made her cry because she's trying her best and didn't realize I could hear normal footsteps. Now she's apparently walking around in socks only and feeling anxious in her own apartment. I feel like absolute crap about this. I wasn't trying to make someone anxious. I was trying to show the building manager that his standards were ridiculous. He sent an email to both of us about community living expectations and mutual respect, which solved nothing. The next one is an entitled people story. It's been a long goddamn month. My fiance's grandparents, future mother-in-law's parents, both had pretty scary falls in the last month, and we've all been taking turns making 250-mile trips down to help and visit them. It's been stressful. Next month, fiance and I have a trip planned to go out of the country for a week to see my grandparents, who are older and I haven't seen in years due to them being out of the country. The plan was to have fiance's kid brother, 17M, take care of our pets while we were gone. They both knew of and agreed to this. Well, last night, Führer mother-in-law realized that if we're out of the country, they can't take a 3-day trip to visit mother-in-law's parents. And according to mother-in-law, leaving kid brother by himself for 3 days is a hard no, so she announced she was going to board the dogs. Fiancé took exception to this because our older dog is terrified of everyone outside of the household, and our younger dog is really bad at reading aggressive body language and will actively try to play with dogs that would tear her apart. This started an argument between fiancé and mother-in-law, where mother-in-law accused fiancé of not caring about her own grandparents. Things got heated, but I convinced fiancé to retreat with me into our room. Things seemed to cool down for a bit, but when I ran downstairs to grab fiance's Switch so we could go hide out at my apartment, mother-in-law was still ranting, saying that she wished she never had my fiancé. She was mad at Kid Bro for attempting to bail from the argument and accused him of siding with them, and was saying some of the most unhinged crap imaginable. I tried to gently defend fiancé because frankly she's put her whole life on hold for a decade to support her mom and brother. She kept yelling that fiancé is not her daughter. Eventually fiancé got sick of hearing things and started yelling back at her mom. Mother-in-law called her a b-titch. Fiancé returned the sentiment, and at that point mother-in-law yelled that I should control my stupid idiot because mother-in-law is going to punch her in her stupid ducking face. Mother-in-law went back to her room, still yelling, with my fiancé telling back. I tried to convince mother-in-law that fiancé and I had been hiding for almost an hour while she was still ranting and that we weren't the ones pushing the argument. Eventually she snapped and yelled, "I'm going to get that BTCH," and attempted to sprint past me down the hallway. I interceded and stood between her and my fiancé. Mother-in-law pushed and shoved and tried to squeeze past me in the hallway. She nearly made it too, but I picked her up and put her back down on the other side of me. She then announced that she was going to call 911, which I invited since no violence occurred. Well, I got shoved and she got mildly restrained, but no one was hurt. She yelled at the 911 operator, on speaker so me and fiancé could hear and interject, demanded someone get out there because her daughter was verbally abusing her, and the 911 operator was getting frustrated with her. Eventually she hung up, and minutes later, cops showed up. Thankfully, I knew one of them from work and explained everything I typed out above. Mother-in-law talked to his partner outside. Apparently, my fiancé, who was hiding under her bed, was watching on the Ring camera and watched her mom straight up lie to the cop. They advised us that since no one was injured, mother-in-law claimed I broke her thumb, but it obviously isn't broken, that we should just try to avoid each other and let things settle. After they left, fiancé and I hid in our room, while mother-in-law Bomb texted her about how I'm an evil danger to the whole family. Yesterday I broke her thumb. Now she's texting fiancé that I beat her up in the hallway. I didn't. I'm so ducking heartbroken over this whole thing. I've been with fiancé since high school. I clean the house, I do all the chores, I'm designated driver, I fix the cars, I fix the computers, I help little bro with his homework. I've given so much of myself to this whole family. I help mother-in-law with her extremely evil EX. They frequently comment that I'm too nice because I always stop to help anyone I'm in a position to help. But apparently now to mother-in-law I'm an evil bastard who's unsafe to be around because I wouldn't let her hit her daughter. Duck my life, man. Fiancé says I should have just let her mom punch her in the face because then we could just go back to everything being normal. Anyway, thank you for watching.